Hi everyone, so right now I'm going to be going over the new free unit that we got, Chelle, and showcasing her in a 3 Chelle, 1 Grace clear of Master Kai. So a couple notes about the clear first of all. So it ran a little long, and it's just because it wasn't players that I know, it was a random pub group, and the equipment, since it's the first day of her release really, two of the Chelles weren't running the best equipment. They weren't running the dual Punisher prints, they weren't running Poison Punisher or Frostbite Punisher, which is incredibly strange to me because one of the Chelles was, in fact, running a Frostbite skill, and the other one was running a Poison skill. So we had Poison and Frostbite for the majority of the quest, as you can see. But yeah, the dual Punishers helps a lot, especially because you don't need the crit damage print on Chelle because you can run crit double buff as your third worm print slot, and her defense buff, especially when there's multiple Chelles, will make it so that you're going to have a fair amount of stacks of crit damage anyway. And then you can run the two bow prints, Dear Diary and Force Bond, for a good amount of crit rate and a massive amount of skill damage, 40%, on top of Cat Seat's 180%, so that's 220% skill damage. So you get really good utility out of it. Because she will have a lot of buffs on her, especially with the double buff print, you should really consider using a Frostbite inflicting skill like Xander or Karina's that is modded up based on the amount of buffs you have. You can get some really good damage, as you can see when I inflict Frostbite with Xander's skill, which is my preferred of the two share skills. That you can get some really high damage. I think I hit 1 million once. I was playing in a couple other quests with her. I used her in Ayaha Otaha Expert, and you can easily hit 2-3 million with that skill when you have adequate buffs, especially when you have other units that have defense buffs to trigger even more double buff shenanigans. Beyond that, you just want to have afflictions up. The Punisher prints just so much extra damage on all of her skills. Her S2 also gets buffed up with 8 extra hits from the buffs. And what's so great about that is because she has such high crit rate and has the crit damage double buff, like those hits can hit for a lot of damage, especially when all of them are getting the multiplier individually. It adds up. It can add up really nicely. So she has 2 skills that can easily hit over 1 million damage. In addition to being a bow, which means her skill haste ability helps speed things along pretty nicely, and being a shadow unit, she has access to the best Agito weapon skill in the game, which is the permanent attack rate buff, which is just, it makes things go so quickly. So yeah, overall, Chelle is probably one of the best free units that we've gotten. She's the second 5-star story unit we've gotten. We've gotten a couple 5-star raid units, but the raid units are their own special thing. They almost always have that Bane or resistance. In the case of 2 of them, Mordecai and Felicia got resistances, elemental resistance for Mordecai, undead resistance for Felicia. All of the other ones have a Bane, with the exception of Sufang and Hanabusa. Therion's Bane. Therion's Bane is useful for Agito, because Agito phase 2s are all Therions. So both Hanabusa and Sufang can get really nice damage, really nice numbers against the phase 2 of Agito bosses, or in Sufang's case, he is amazing for Master Ciela since she's always in her Therion form. So once we get Master Tartarus, you might see some Hanabusas and think it's strange, but that Therion's Bane works very well, so don't underestimate him there. But back to Chelle. Chelle has really good damage, really good abilities. She can inspire herself within 2 shapeshifts. Always shapeshifts to Cat, which Cat's dragon form, really solid, can inflict sleep, can have the damage over time zone, which is really useful. Off element, it's especially useful because you can shapeshift, use the skill. It'll continue damaging after you've been returned to your adventurer form, and in your adventurer form, you can just continue to charge your skills and rack up more damage. Also, off element, it'll continue doing damage, and you can start charging your dragon again because you would want a dragon for any unavoidable damage unless there is a Grace in your party. So from there, the only notes I would want to make about Chelle is comparing her to Xena. She's much more offensively and support focused. Xena's recovery was nice, and her damage around her zone was useful. It was useful in Kai for destroying the spheres, but overall she just didn't have enough damage to keep up, and really compared to the other Shadow Wands, she still doesn't. However, compared to other Shadow Bows, Chelle has a lot more to offer than them. Even with Nefaria's Dispel, Nefaria doesn't keep up with Belina, or even Grace as a Dispeller. She's better than Galax because Galax's struggle if he puts up the shield when their gauge is empty, they can't Dispel. But Nefaria can run into a similar problem if she doesn't hold a Force Strike for when a shield comes up. So they're pretty much in the same boat there. So she doesn't really have much utility over Chelle there, but Chelle's team-wide buffs and significantly beefier damage make her much more useful than Nefaria. Also because Chelle has buffs on her at pretty much all times to synergize with her S2. She's a great user of the Frostbite skills, as I mentioned before. Karina and Xander's skills both scale up based on the number of buffs you have. Adis is a Crisis character. He's not bad, but just overshadowed by both Belina and Natalie, who do the job better. Natalie hits so hard, and Belina hits fairly hard too, not quite as hard as Natalie. However, her Dragon Drive damage, her basic attack combos are hitting as hard as a lot of Adventurer's skills, especially if you use the standard attack damage co-ability from either Loxi or Tiki. Just insane. And then on-demand debuff, she can spend the entire quest in her Dragon Drive form and just dispel any shield that Kai even tries to get. That said, Chelle and Belina can work very nicely together. Belina providing nice defense buffs so that and strength buffs so that Belina can run strength double buff sets that she ran with Patia. Chelle is a great support DPS because she can synergize well. She has her own DPS, so she can work well with a Patia and a Belina. Meanwhile, Veronica, who is typically slotted in, has the second DPS slot if you're not running two Belinas. Veronica's selfish DPS. She does really good on her own, but doesn't provide much else for the team. If you run both Chelle and Patia, you can get really good damage mods out of both Chelle and Belina from all of the buffs provided by those two. So overall, she just has so much to offer. She can fit into almost any team that you try and put her in, and just I as much as I do like Veronica's cheese ability, especially in the new 20-second Master Kai strat that's 3 Veronicas and Mitsuba, selfish DPS gets power crept really easily. We saw that with Galax, that she doesn't really provide much else for teams, and with the rebalance, it overshadowed her. Under special circumstances, if you can immobilize a boss, she can do really well, but Chelle it goes beyond selfish DPS, which means it takes longer to power creep her. Look at Galio, who stayed on top for over a year. Galax had a 6-month reign. Selfish DPS never lasts as long. Galax is still good, don't get me wrong, she just doesn't hold up. Well, thank you all.